This is the daily video for July 20th. So far when we've talked about confidence intervals, what we've really looked at is how to compute confidence intervals. And we've talked a little bit about what a confidence interval means, or in other words, the interpretation of a confidence interval. But that's really what the focus of today is going to be. What is the interpretation of a confidence interval? And so hopefully you've seen in the notes and the videos that the interpretation of a confidence interval means that out of a very long list of out of a very long list of confidence intervals, if we're 95% confident, that means that 95% of the confidence intervals will cover the parameter. And this is a very funny sounding interpretation because the interpretation of a single confidence interval is actually in terms of many confidence intervals. And so the first exercise today is meant to actually give you a visualization of that and to hopefully help further that understanding of the interpretation of a confidence interval. And what the first exercise is going to have you do is it's going to have you simulate data where you know what the true value of the parameter is, and then we're going to inspect and see how these confidence intervals behave. And so when you do that first exercise, you're going to make sure that you watch the videos that I posted, because those videos are going to help you understand exactly what you're wanting to take away from that online applet that you're going to use and exactly what you should be seeing. The second exercise you're going to look at is from the workbook, and what the workbook has done is it's given you 5 statements about confidence intervals that are all incorrect, and it's going to ask you why those are incorrect. The interpretation of a confidence interval is one of those things that is widely misunderstood, even by people that use confidence intervals in practice, and so that's why it's important to take the time to really, stop and think about what a confidence interval means and what it's actually telling us. And one thing to really keep in mind when going through these 5 statements and trying to figure out why they're not true is to remember that a parameter is a fixed value. It doesn't change. Now, we may not know what that value is, but whatever that value is, it's not changing. So if we talk about the value of a parameter changing, and remember a parameter is also known as a true proportion, so if we talk about the probability of that parameter taking values, that doesn't really make sense because the parameter only takes one value and it's a fixed value. So since it's fixed, we can't really assign a probability to it taking values. Whereas the statistic and the confidence interval, on the other hand, those are what we call random. And that's because from sample to sample, the value of the statistic and the value of the confidence interval is going to change from sample to sample. And so that will change, and we could talk about the probability of a statistic taking certain values. So you'll notice in some of those statements, the statements are going to talk about the true proportion or the parameter taking certain values. And you automatically know that those statements are false, again, because of the idea of the parameter being a fixed value and the fact that it doesn't change. And the other ones, what you're going to want to notice is that it's going to talk about the confidence that the proportion lies between the endpoints of a single interval. And again, after you do the first exercise today, you should see that that's not true. And that's because the whole idea in confidence is that from sample to sample, the confidence interval is going to take many different values. Some of those confidence intervals are going to cover the parameter, and some of them are not. And so each of those statements in the second exercise are going to go against that idea somehow. In other words, they're going to try to imply that the parameter is moving around when really it's the confidence interval that's moving around. And again, you should be able to visualize that in the first exercise today. You're going to see that the parameter is fixed and it's the confidence interval that's moving around. And so if you have any questions, as always, feel free to ask, and I will be around.